The storm turned Pleasant Valley Bridge into a death trap that night. Thunder crashed as a black Mercedes lost control, smashing through the guardrail and plunging 30 feet into the raging river below. James Mitchell, a single father heading home with discount groceries, witnessed the whole thing. Without a second thought, he pulled over and dove into the churning waters. The current was brutal, the darkness absolute. The luxury car was sinking fast, its interior already half submerged. Through the driver's window, he saw her, a woman in elegant business attire, desperately pressing against the jammed door as water filled the cabin. What this humble single father couldn't possibly know was that in those next 60 seconds, his act of courage would unlock a fairy tale that would change not just his life, but his children's destiny forever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Dawn crept through the worn curtains of the Mitchell home as James stood at the stove, his calloused hands steady despite the bone-deep exhaustion. The events of last night's rescue still played through his mind, but breakfast wouldn't make itself. He cracked eggs into a bowl, counting them carefully. Only 4 left now. The grocery run had been cut short by the accident, and the month's budget was already stretched thin. "Dad, is that bacon I smell?" Sarah, his eldest at 15, appeared. In the doorway, her school backpack already slung over one shoulder. She had their mother's eyes, warm brown and knowing. Too knowing sometimes. James saw how she noticed the pile of bills he'd hastily tucked under yesterday's newspaper. "Just the regular breakfast for my regular superhero," 11-year-old Emma chirped, padding into the kitchen in mismatched socks. She wrapped her arms around her father's waist, and James felt the familiar ache in his chest. Emma had been only 7 when Catherine passed, too young to fully understand, but old enough to remember. The morning sun caught the edge of the family photo on the wall, the last one they'd taken together. Catherine's smile, radiant despite the illness that would take her just months later, seemed to watch over them. 4 years had passed, but some mornings the loss felt as fresh as yesterday. James flipped the last piece of bacon onto a paper towel. "All right, troops, breakfast assembly line. Sarah, you're on toast duty. Emma, grab the juice." The girls moved with practiced efficiency, a routine born of necessity and teamwork. These quiet morning moments were precious, a reminder of why he pushed through every long shift at the factory. "Dad, you look tired," Sarah observed, buttering toast with careful precision. "Late night at work again?" James hesitated. The memory of cold river water and desperate eyes flashing through his mind. "Had a bit of an adventure on the way home," he said carefully, not wanting to worry them. "Someone needed help, that's all." "Was it about the accident by Pleasant Valley Bridge?" Emma asked, smartphone already in hand. "It's all over next door. Someone said a car went into the river." Sarah's eyes widened. "Dad, you didn't eat your breakfast, both of you?" James deflected, though pride warmed his chest. "The bus won't wait, and Mrs. Henderson already gave me the evil eye last week when you were running late." As they ate, James reviewed the morning's logistics in his head. Sarah had volleyball practice after school. Emma needed to be picked up at 3:30 for her dentist appointment, and somewhere in between, he needed to find time to finish that grocery run. The factory shift started at 7, which meant a knock. At the door interrupted his mental calculations. 3 sharp raps, oddly formal for their neighborhood. "I'll get it." Emma bounded up, but James caught her shoulder gently. "Hold on there, speed racer. Let me handle this." Through the front window, he caught a glimpse of black SUVs lining their modest street. His heart skipped a beat as he remembered the woman from last night. Her elegant suit soaked through, hands trembling as she thanked him before disappearing into the rain. "Dad?" Sarah's voice carried a note of concern. "Everything okay?" James straightened his worn t-shirt, suddenly aware of how out of place those vehicles looked in front of their small home. "Yeah, honey, everything's fine. Just finish your breakfast, both of you." He opened the door, and the morning sun caught a flash of silver a familiar cross necklace hanging at the throat of a woman whose composed appearance gave no hint that she'd been fighting for her life just hours before. The woman on his doorstep was a study in contrasts from the one he'd pulled from the river. Her charcoal suit was crisp and immaculate, her dark hair swept into an elegant chignon. Only her eyes remained the same, deep, searching, and somehow both vulnerable and commanding at once. "Mr. Mitchell," she said, her voice carrying the same cultured tone he remembered from their brief exchange in the storm. "I hope I'm not interrupting your morning." Behind him, he could hear his daughters whispering, their breakfast forgotten. The SUVs had drawn curious faces to neighboring windows. Their street hadn't seen vehicles this expensive since old Mr. Peterson's funeral procession. "Not interrupting," James managed, acutely aware of his faded T-shirt and the morning stubble he hadn't had time to shave. "But I wasn't expecting—" "Elena Chen," she said, extending a hand with perfectly manicured nails. A simple business card appeared in her other hand, the cream-colored stock so thick it looked more like art than stationery. "And I believe I owe you my life." The card's minimal design carried only her name and title. Elena Chen, CEO, Horizon Technologies. James's thumb brushed over the embossed letters as reality shifted beneath his feet. He'd seen Horizon's sleek campus on the outskirts of town, had driven past its gleaming towers while delivering parts to smaller factories. The company was a tech giant, its reach extending far beyond their modest industrial town. "Dad," Sarah's voice broke through his daze. "Everything okay?" Elena's gaze shifted past him, softening as she took in the girls. "Your daughters? They must be proud to have such a brave father." "They don't know yet," James admitted quietly, "about last night." "Then perhaps we should remedy that." Elena's smile held warmth that hadn't been there in her initial business-like greeting. "May I come?" I believe we have quite a story to share." The next few minutes were surreal. Elena Chen, whose net worth probably exceeded their entire neighborhood's combined value, sat at their scratched kitchen table, declining coffee with gracious politeness, while James's daughters stared in undisguised fascination. "Your father," Elena began, her composure perfect, but her voice carrying an undercurrent of emotion, "drove past Pleasant Valley Bridge at exactly the right moment last night. When my car went through the guardrail, I was certain—" She paused, fingers touching the silver cross at her throat. "Well, let's just say I've never been so grateful for divine timing." Emma's eyes were saucer-wide. "Dad, you saved her. Like, for real?" "It wasn't—" James started to demur, but Elena cut him off gently. "It was extraordinary," she said firmly. "He didn't hesitate, didn't wait for help or consider the danger. He simply acted." She reached into her briefcase, withdrawing a folder. "Which is why I'm here. Mr. Mitchell, James, I'd like to offer you something in return." "Mom," James began, discomfort evident in his stance. "I don't need perhaps not, but deserve absolutely." Elena's tone was kind, but brooked no argument. "I've spent the morning learning about you, James Mitchell. 16 years at Carlton Manufacturing, single father, active in community outreach despite working overtime most weeks." She smiled at his surprise. "I believe in knowing who I'm dealing with." Sarah, ever protective, straightened in her chair. "Our dad's the best," she said, chin lifting slightly. "He doesn't need a chance to do more," Eleanor finished smoothly. "To perhaps make a broader difference in the world, to secure a future for his family while helping others." She opened the folder, revealing documents that made James's breath catch. "I'm not offering charity, Mr. Mitchell. I'm offering opportunity." The school bus honked outside, making them all jump. James looked at his daughters, then at his watch. "Girls, you need to go." Elena nodded, standing. "We have time to discuss this properly. Perhaps over dinner?" She produced another business card, this one with a phone number handwritten on the back. "My private line. When you're ready to talk about your future, call me." As his daughters rushed to gather their things, Elena paused at the door. "Oh, and James." Thank you, not just for last night, but for reminding me that there are still people in this world who act purely out of goodness. The business card felt heavy in James's pocket as he watched the black SUVs pull away, their tinted windows reflecting the morning sun. His daughters peppered him with questions as they hurried to the bus, but his mind was stuck on Elena's words about the future and the way her eyes had held his when she'd said them. That evening, after the girls had finished their homework, James found them huddled over Sarah's laptop in the living room. Emma's excited whisper carried across the room. "Look how many projects her company has. Dad saved like the most important person ever." James paused in the doorway, dish towel still in hand. On the screen, a newspaper article showed Elena Chen standing before a crowd, cutting a ribbon at what appeared to be a new medical facility. The headline read, "Horizon Technologies launches revolutionary healthcare initiative in developing nations." Did you know she built hospitals in 12 countries? Sarah scrolled through the article. And look at this. Their clean water program reached over 1 million people last year. She glanced up at her father. "Dad, why didn't you tell us about the rescue right away?" James settled into his worn armchair, the springs creaking familiarly. "Honestly, it didn't seem real. Still doesn't." He rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "Sometimes life throws you curves you can't quite believe, like saving." "A billionaire?" Emma grinned. "Tech pioneer," Sarah corrected, still reading. "It says here she built Horizon from nothing after immigrating at 18. Started coding in her garage, got a scholarship to MIT. She paused, expression softening. "Dad, listen to this part. Chen credits her late parents' sacrifice for her success, establishing the Chen Family Foundation to honor their memory through humanitarian work." James felt something shift in his chest. He remembered the way Elena had touched that silver cross when speaking of the accident, the brief flash of vulnerability beneath her composed exterior. Perhaps they had more in common than their different worlds suggested. "There's more," Emma chimed in, pointing at the screen. "The foundation just announced this huge project to help single-parent families with education and—" She trailed off, looking at her father with dawning realization. "Dad, is that why she came here? To offer you a job?" Before James could answer, Sarah pulled up another article, this one more recent. "Look at these pictures from their last charity gala. She's always alone in them, even at her own events." She scrolled through photos of Elena in elegant evening wear, maintaining a professional smile while surrounded by celebrities and business leaders. "Must be lonely at the top." "Girls," James cautioned, but his mind wandered to the handwritten number on the business card, still untouched in his pocket. He'd felt the weight of it all day at the factory, through every repetitive motion on the assembly line. "You should call her," Sarah said suddenly, closing the laptop. "Not because she's rich or important, but did you see how many people her foundation has helped? Maybe you could be part of that." Emma nodded enthusiastically. "Plus, she's pretty, like really pretty." "Emma," James felt his ears grow warm. It's not about Dad." Sarah's tone was gentle, so much like her mother's that it made his heart ache. "Mom would want you to take chances again, to do more than just survive." The room fell quiet, save for the distant hum of traffic and the ticking of Catherine's old wall clock. James looked at the family photo above the fireplace, at his late wife's smile. Sarah was right. Catherine had always pushed him to dream bigger, to reach beyond the comfortable and familiar. He pulled out the business card, its elegant simplicity somehow both intimidating and inviting. The handwritten numbers seemed to carry an echo of Elena's voice. "When you're ready to talk about your future." "You know what?" Emma broke the silence. "I bet she was scared this morning." James looked up, surprised. "What do you mean? Coming here? To our house? She probably worried we'd just want her money, or that you'd be different from the person who jumped in to save her." Emma shrugged. "Must be hard, never knowing if people like you for you, out of the mouths of babes," James thought, studying his younger daughter with amazement. Here, They'd been focused on the gulf between their worlds, while Emma saw straight to the human heart of the matter. The business card seemed lighter now, less daunting. Perhaps Elena's carefully maintained composure, her precise words and power suits were armor of a different kind than his casual clothes and careful budgeting, but armor nonetheless. James reached for his phone, aware of his daughters holding their breath. The numbers gleamed in the evening light, a bridge between two worlds that had crashed together in one stormy moment. Sometimes, he realized, courage wasn't just about diving into rivers. Sometimes it was about taking a chance on what waited on the other side. The restaurant Elena had chosen was understated but elegant, tucked away in a renovated Victorian mansion on the edge of town. James adjusted his tie, borrowed from his neighbor Mr. Rodriguez, and tried not to feel like an imposter as the maître. Dee led him to a secluded table in the garden terrace. Elena was already there, but not as he expected. Gone was the power suit, replaced by a simple blue dress that softened her usual corporate armor. She stood as he approached, and for a moment neither spoke, both seemingly aware of how different this felt from their previous encounters. "You look nice," she said finally, breaking the silence. "Though you didn't need to dress up. I probably should have suggested somewhere more casual." "And miss seeing this place?" James smiled, relaxing slightly. "The girls looked it up online. Emma's convinced it's magical, especially the garden lights. Your daughters are delightful." Elena's expression warmed. "Sarah reminds me of myself at that age, so protective of her family. And Emma, she sees right through people, doesn't she?" James thought of Emma's insight about Elena being scared to visit them. "She gets that from her mother." A waiter appeared with a leather folder, which Elena accepted with a quiet "thank you," but instead of a menu, it contained a single document, letterhead bearing the Chen Foundation logo. "Before we order," she said, her tone shifting slightly to something more vulnerable, "I want to be clear about why I asked you here." She slid the folder across the table. "This isn't about repaying a debt, James. What you did that night, jumping into danger without hesitation, it showed me something I've been looking for." James opened the folder, his eyes widening at the title. Director of Global Initiatives. Chen Foundation. "Our foundation has grown faster than we anticipated," Eleanor continued, her fingers absently touching the silver cross at her neck, a gesture he was beginning to recognize as a sign of emotional significance. "We need someone who understands real struggle, who acts from genuine compassion rather than corporate strategy. Someone who sees a problem and jumps in to solve it, quite literally in your case." The salary figure made James's breath catch, but it was the job description that held his attention. Overseeing humanitarian projects, coordinating disaster relief, implementing education initiatives for underprivileged communities. It was everything Sarah had talked about from their research, but from the inside. "I don't have the qualifications," he said quietly. "No college degree, no corporate experience. You have exactly the qualifications I need." Elena leaned forward, her voice intense. "Do you know what I saw in that river, James? Not just courage, but instinct. Pure, unfiltered compassion. I've sat through hundreds of interviews with highly qualified executives who talk about impact metrics and optimization strategies. What I need is someone who understands, bone deep, what it means to help people." A warm breeze stirred the garden lights, casting gentle shadows across their table. In that soft illumination, James saw past Eleanor's CEO persona to something more. A woman who carried her own weights, her own missions. "The position includes full relocation assistance," she continued, then hesitated. "Though you wouldn't have to move far. There's a lovely house near the foundation headquarters, just 10 minutes from the girls' school. I took the liberty of having it prepared just in case." "Eleanor," James interrupted gently. "Why me? Really?" She met his gaze, and for a moment, her carefully maintained composure slipped. "Because when my car was sinking, you didn't see Elena Chen, CEO. You saw someone who needed help. Do you know how rare that is in my world? She smiled softly. And maybe, just maybe, I believe some things happen for a reason. The job offer sat between them, more than just paper and ink. It was a bridge between their worlds, an invitation to something neither of them had quite named yet. I'll need time, James said, to think about it, to talk with the girls. Of course, Elena signaled the waiter. Now, shall we order? I hear the chef's special is exceptional tonight. As they turned to their menus, James caught Elena stealing glances at him, her professional demeanor softening each time their eyes met. Perhaps Emma was right about the garden being magical. Something was certainly shifting in the space between CEO and factory worker, rescuer and rescued, two single parents who'd found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances. The factory's time clock echoed through the empty locker room as James pulled his weathered work badge from his coveralls. One last time. 16 years of routine condensed into a small plastic rectangle with a faded photo. He ran his thumb over the worn edges, remembering his first day here, young, newly married, full of simple dreams about providing for his family. So it's true then? Mike, his line supervisor, appeared in the doorway. You're really leaving us for the fancy corporate world? James tucked the badge into his pocket, a strange mix of emotions tightening his chest. Got an opportunity I can't pass up, Mike, for the girls. Yeah, word's gotten around. Mike crossed his arms, but his expression was kind. Some folks are saying you hit the lottery, saving that CEO lady. Others are calling it a modern-day fairy tale. It's just a job, James said, though they both knew it was more than that. A chance to help people on a bigger scale. Well, the guys wanted to send you off proper. Mike gestured toward the break room, where voices and laughter spilled into the hallway. Can't leave without saying goodbye to your second family, right? The break room was packed with familiar faces, people he'd worked alongside for years, shared lunches with, celebrated birthdays, and grieved losses with. Someone had brought in a cake, its frosting slightly melted in the factory's perpetual warmth. A banner hung crookedly. Congratulations on your promotion to hero. Speech, called out Betty from quality control, her eyes suspiciously moist. Tell us about your fancy new job. James felt his ears redden. It's not, he cleared his throat, looking at these people who'd supported him through Catherine's illness, who'd covered his shifts when the girls were sick, who'd become more than just co-workers. This place, all of you, you've been here for me through everything. When Catherine, his voice caught slightly, when things were hardest, you carried me through, and now you're carrying others. Mike added quietly. That's what Pedro from third shift said when he heard about the foundation work you'll be doing. Someone pressed a small package into James's hands. Inside was a group photo from last year's company picnic, framed with signatures and well wishes. Around the border, in the picture he was laughing at something, surrounded by these people who'd become family. Keep it on your fancy new desk, Betty sniffed. Remember where you came from. Speaking of fancy, Mike grinned, nodding toward the window. Your ride's here. A sleek black car had pulled up outside, its windows tinted against the afternoon sun. James recognized Elena's driver, Thomas, standing professionally by the door. The contrast between the luxury vehicle and the factory's weathered exterior wasn't lost on anyone. Look at you, Betty dabbed at her eyes. Our James off to change the world. I'm still me, James assured them, but even he could feel the shift happening. Yesterday, he'd toured the Foundation's headquarters with Eleanor, seen the scale of what they did, what he'd be part of. The way she'd looked at him as she showed him his future office, pride and something softer in her eyes. Course you are, Mike clapped his shoulder. Just with better suits. Laughter rippled through the room, breaking the emotional tension. James hugged his way through the crowd, accepting good wishes and gentle teasing about his fairy tale princess. CEO. By the time he reached the car, his old badge was heavy with meaning in his pocket, a reminder of where he'd been, what had shaped him. Thomas opened the car door with a slight bow that made James want to laugh and cringe simultaneously. Mr. Mitchell, Ms. Chen is waiting at the foundation to begin your orientation." James turned for one last look at the factory, at the faces pressed against the break-room window. 16 years of his life, ending not with regret, but with possibility. His phone buzzed, a text from Sarah. "Proud of you, Dad. Mom would be too." As the car pulled away, James touched the badge in his pocket one last time. Some endings were really beginnings in disguise, and sometimes the biggest act of courage wasn't jumping into a river. It was letting go of the familiar shore to see what waited downstream. The house keys felt foreign in James's hand, heavy, brass and ornate, nothing like the simple steel ones they'd used at their old home. He stood on the wide front porch, daughters on either side, staring at the Victorian-style house Eleanor had prepared for them. Prepared was an understatement. The 3-story home looked like something from a magazine, with its wraparound porch, mature maple trees, and carefully tended garden beds. "Dad," Emma whispered, clutching his arm. "Is this really ours?" Before he could answer, a familiar figure emerged from behind one of the moving vans. Elena, dressed casually in jeans and a light sweater, carried a potted plant and wore an uncertain smile. "I hope you don't mind," she said, approaching the steps. "I wanted to be here for this moment, and to give you your housewarming gift." She held out the plant, a peace lily. "They're supposed to bring harmony to new homes, though I understand if this all feels overwhelming," James supplied, managing a smile. "Just a bit. It's amazing," Emma burst out, while Sarah stood, quiet, taking everything in with thoughtful eyes. Elena's smile warmed. "Would you like the tour? I promise I haven't overstepped too much with the furnishings. Most rooms are intentionally sparse, waiting for your personal touch." The front door opened to a foyer that made Emma gasp, and Sarah forget her careful reserve. Sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, casting rainbow patterns across hardwood floors. But it was the little touches that caught James's attention. A coat rack at just the right height for the girls, a bench perfect for removing muddy shoes, practical things mixed seamlessly with the elegance. "Through here," Elena guided them, "is the kitchen. I remembered Emma mentioning she likes to bake with you." The kitchen was a perfect blend of professional and homey, modern appliances, alongside a well-worn cookie jar that looked suspiciously like the one from their old house. "We had the movers bring some things early," Elena explained, catching James's questioning look. "I wanted it to feel like home from the first moment." Sarah ran her hand along the counter. "Dad, look, space for all your recipe books, and a real breakfast nook." They moved through the house, each room revealing thoughtful details. Emma's room had a reading nook with built-in bookshelves. Sarah's had a desk positioned to catch the morning light, perfect for her art projects. The main bathroom featured a double vanity, no more morning rushes to get ready for school. James's master suite was on the second floor, and he had to catch his breath when Elena opened the door. The room was spacious but not ostentatious, with a sitting area and a view of the backyard. But what stopped him short was the familiar quilt draped across the bed, Catherine's handiwork, the one she'd finished just before getting sick. "Elena," he said quietly, emotion thick in his voice. "The movers found it carefully packed away," she explained softly. "I hope it was okay to—" He nodded, unable to speak for a moment. The girls had gone quiet too, recognizing their mother's last project. "There's one more thing," Elena said, leading them to a room off the main hallway. "I call it the heart room." Inside, she'd created a family space. One wall held floating shelves already arranged with their family photos, including the one from James's factory farewell. Catherine's presence was honored here too, not hidden away, but integrated naturally into the story of their lives. "You can change anything," Elena added quickly. "I just thought—" "It's perfect," Sarah said suddenly, surprising them all. She turned to Elena, her eyes bright. "You didn't just give us a house, you gave us a home." Emma nodded enthusiastically. "And look, Dad, space for new pictures too." James caught Elena watching him, vulnerability clear in her expression. She'd taken such care with everything, balancing luxury with comfort, newness with familiar touches. Standing in this room, surrounded by his family's history while facing its future, he felt something shift into place. "Thank you," he said simply, but his eyes conveyed more. Eleanor's cheeks colored slightly. "Well, I should let you settle in. Unless—" she hesitated. "Would you like help unpacking? I make a decent unpacking assistant, despite what my executive team might think." "Stay," James found himself saying. "Please, we could order pizza, make it a proper moving day." "Pizza in our fancy new house?" Emma grinned. "Can we eat it in the heart room?" Elena's laugh was unexpected and genuine. "I think that sounds perfect." As the girls ran off to find the pizza menus from their boxes, James and Elena stood in the doorway of the heart room, watching as the afternoon sun painted everything in warm gold. The house keys had stopped feeling so foreign in his hand. Sometimes, he realized, a key was more than just a way to open doors. It was an invitation to open your heart to new possibilities. James stared at the project folder on his desk, its contents spread out before him like a puzzle missing half its pieces. 3 weeks into his new role, and the learning curve felt steeper than ever. Budget projections, stakeholder analyses, impact metrics, the corporate language still felt foreign on his tongue, even if the underlying mission resonated in his heart. A gentle knock drew his attention. Elena stood in his office doorway, holding 2 cups of coffee. "You've been frowning at those papers for an hour," she said, setting 1 cup beside him. "I thought you might need this." The coffee was from the little cart outside, not the executive lounge, made exactly how he'd mentioned liking it during their first week. The small consideration wasn't lost on him. "Is it that obvious I'm struggling?" He gestured at the scattered documents from their latest humanitarian initiative, a series of medical clinics in underserved communities. "Actually," Elena settled into the chair across from him, "I was just reviewing your notes on the clinic project, your insights about placing the facilities near public transportation routes. That's exactly the kind of practical thinking we've been missing." James picked up one of the papers, a formal proposal he'd been wrestling with all morning. "Maybe, but I still feel like I'm speaking a different language sometimes. Yesterday, someone asked about our KPIs for Q4, and I had to pretend my phone was ringing." Elena's laugh was warm and genuine. "Key performance indicators for Q4, she translated. "And trust me, most of the people throwing around acronyms don't understand half of what they're saying. They just like sounding important." She leaned forward, her expression turning serious. "You know what you said in the planning meeting yesterday about how we should hire local community members to staff the clinics? Was that wrong?" "I just thought it was brilliant," she interrupted. "So obvious that everyone with MBAs and fancy degrees missed it completely. You saw it because you understand people, James, because you know what it means to be part of a community." He felt warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with the coffee. "Still, I should probably learn all these terms. There's a whole folder of corporate jargon I've been trying to memorize at night." "Show me," Eleanor said, moving her chair around to his side of the desk. Their shoulders brushed as she leaned in to look at his notes, and James caught a hint of her perfume. Something subtle and elegant that made him think of garden lights and first dinners. "Here." He pulled out his handwritten notes, each page filled with definitions and acronyms, though I'm not sure how many more my brain can hold. Elena studied the pages, her expression softening. "You've been working on this every night." "After the girls go to bed," he admitted. "I want to do this right. The foundation's work is too important for me to mess up because I don't know the difference between ROI and RFP. Return on investment and request for proposal," she said automatically, then caught herself and smiled. "But that's not what makes you valuable here." She pulled the project folder closer. "Look at this clinic layout. Tell me what you see." James studied the architectural drawings. "The waiting room's too small," he said after a moment. "And these chairs, they're all individual seats. In my experience, people often bring family members to appointments, especially in tight-knit communities. We need some bench seating, maybe a play area for kids." He continued, pointing out practical improvements, drawing from years of taking his girls to overcrowded community clinics. When he finally looked up, Elena was watching him with an expression that made his heart skip. "That, right there," she said softly, "is worth more than any acronym. You see people, James, real people, not just data points." Their eyes held for a moment too long to be purely professional. Elena cleared her throat and stood, smoothing her skirt. "I have a board meeting in 10 minutes, but—" She hesitated. "The girls mentioned you all cook dinner together on Thursdays. Would you mind if I brought takeout and joined you tonight? We could go over the clinic proposals in a more relaxed setting." James thought of his daughter's knowing looks, of Emma's not-so-subtle hints about having Eleanor over more often. "We'd like that," he said. "Though fair warning, Emma will probably try to get you to judge her latest baking experiment. I look forward to it." Eleanor's smile held warmth that had nothing to do with business proposals. At the door, she paused. "And James, keep the practical insights coming. They're exactly what this place needs." After she left, James looked down at his notes about corporate terminology. The words still seemed foreign, but somehow less intimidating. Perhaps success here wasn't about learning a new language, but about translating what he already knew into something that could help more people. He pulled the clinic proposal closer, picked up his pen, and began writing from the heart. "Tech billionaire's guardian angel, the incredible story behind Elena Chen's miraculous rescue." The headline screamed across James's tablet screen, accompanied by a grainy security camera image from Pleasant Valley Bridge. Someone had leaked the footage, showing his truck parked haphazardly, his figure diving into the churning waters. "Dad!" Sarah burst into his home office, her own phone clutched tight. "It's everywhere. TikTok, Instagram, even the morning news." She thrust the phone at him, showing a viral video compilation. The rescue footage, photos of Elena at corporate events, shots of their house taken by drive-by reporters. His own phone buzzed incessantly. Old friends, distant relatives, media requests. Even Mike from the factory had texted, "Guess the fairy tale's out of the bag, hero." The house phone rang, their unlisted number somehow discovered. Emma appeared in the doorway, anxiety clear on her face. "There are people with cameras outside." Before James could respond, a sleek black SUV pulled into their driveway, sending the gathered photographers scrambling. Elena emerged, her usual grace intact despite the chaos, Thomas running interference with an umbrella against the camera flashes. James met her at the door, ushering her inside quickly. Her composed expression cracked the moment the door closed. "James, I'm so sorry," she said, hands twisting the strap of her designer bag. "Someone in building security sold the footage. I've already had legal take action, but hey," he caught her fidgeting hands in his, "this isn't your fault, but it is. Your privacy, the girl's privacy." She looked stricken. "I should have anticipated this, should have had better security protocols." "Mom, look," Emma called from the living room window. "More news vans." Eleanor flinched at the word "mom," though James noticed his daughter hadn't even realized her slip. These Thursday dinners had become so natural over the past weeks, Elena fitting into their family rhythm as if she'd always been there. "We need to get ahead of this," Elena said, professional mask slipping back into place. But James saw the worry. Beneath it, not for her reputation but for them. "Actually," Sarah spoke up, tablet in hand, "people love it. Look at these comments." They gathered around as she scrolled through social media reactions. "Real-life fairy tale. Single dad. Hero plus self-made billionaire. Perfect match. Finally, a CEO who values character over status. That dive into the river, though. Get you a man who'd do that." "They're calling it the modern Cinderella story," Sarah continued. "Except people like that, you're not changing Dad, Elena, that you value what he already is. Elena's breath caught audibly. James felt her hand slip into his, seeking anchor. "Still," she said, "you shouldn't have to deal with this exposure. I can have security here within the hour, arrange for private transportation for the girls. Or," James squeezed her hand, "we could order pizza and watch a movie. Show them there's no story here except people living their lives. While they're all outside, taking pictures, let them." Emma shrugged, already reaching for the pizza menu, their usual Thursday tradition. "They'll get bored eventually. And anyway, we can't let them ruin pizza night." Eleanor looked around at their concerned faces, her corporate crisis, management training warring with the simple wisdom of family life. "You're really not angry about any of this? About having to admit I know the most amazing woman in tech?" James smiled. "I think I'll survive." A camera flash went off outside. But inside their home, their sanctuary, it felt distant and unimportant. Elena slowly relaxed, letting out a shaky breath. "I suppose I should stay," she said, a smile tugging at her lips. "For security purposes, of course." "Of course," James agreed seriously. "Can't have you fighting through that media circus out there. Could be dangerous, might need someone to rescue you." "Dad!" Both girls groaned at the terrible joke, but Elena's laugh was real and relieved. Later, after pizza and a movie, with the girls asleep upstairs and the media circus finally thinning outside, Elena and James stood in the heart room. The day's viral article was pulled up on his tablet, its dramatic headline now seeming almost amusing. "Guardian Angel?" he teased gently. Elena touched the silver cross at her neck, then reached for his hand. "No," she said softly. "Just a man who saw someone in need and acted, though I'm beginning to think there might have been some divine intervention involved that night." Outside, one last camera flashed. Inside, in the warm light of their family photos, old and new together, James found he didn't mind the world knowing their story. Some things were worth being in the spotlight for. The thank you card arrived on a Tuesday morning, hand-delivered to James's office. The envelope was clearly chosen by a child, bright blue with silver stars, but the careful handwriting inside belonged to Elena's nephew, Marcus. "Dear Mr. Mitchell," it read, "thank you for having me over for game night. Nobody's ever beaten Aunt Elena at Scrabble before. She pretends to be mad, but she can't stop smiling when she talks about it. Even Mom noticed. Could you teach me that card trick you showed us? Also, your cookies are way better than our chef's. Don't tell him I said that. Your friend, Marcus." James smiled, remembering Eleanor's mock outrage at his triple-word score, the way her eyes had danced, despite her competitive protests. The game night hadn't been planned. Marcus had simply been with Elena when she dropped by with foundation documents, and somehow 1 hour had turned into an entire evening. A soft knock pulled him from the memory. Elena stood in his doorway, holding a stack of papers but making no move to enter. Something felt different about her presence today. More hesitant, almost shy. "I see Marcus's card found you," she said, nodding toward the bright envelope. "He's been talking about that evening all week. My sister says he's never taken to anyone so quickly." "He's a great kid," James replied, watching as she finally stepped into the office, "though I notice he didn't mention beating Emma at Connect 4. Twice. Ah, well, we Chen women have to maintain some dignity." Eleanor's attempt at hauteur was ruined by her growing smile. "Speaking of which, I wanted to thank you for making him feel so welcome, for making us both feel—" She trailed off, but James heard the unspoken word, "at home." Their impromptu family gatherings had been happening more frequently, dinner turning into movie nights, document reviews becoming weekend brunches. The lines between professional and personal had begun to blur in the most natural of ways. "Actually," Elena continued, fiddling with her silver cross, "that's partly why I'm here. Marcus has a school carnival this weekend. He specifically asked if you and the girls would come, but I completely understand if it's too—" "We'd love to," James interrupted gently. He'd learned to read her nervous tells over the past months. The way she touched her necklace, how her CEO confidence wavered when asking for anything personal. Really, the relief in her voice was almost tangible. It's just, my sister will be there, and some of the other parents, and I know it might seem like I'm pushing too. Elena. James stood, moving around his desk to face her properly. We'd love to come, though I should warn you that Emma's been practicing her ring toss skills. She's determined to win one of those giant stuffed animals. Oh God, the carnival prizes. Elena laughed, tension melting away. Marcus won this enormous purple giraffe last year. It barely fit in the car. Shannon, my sister, still hasn't forgiven me for letting him keep it in the living room. I should meet this Shannon, James said carefully. Thank her for raising such a good kid. Something flickered in Elena's eyes. Hope, maybe fear, definitely something deeper than casual conversation warranted. She wants to meet you too. All of you. She says, Elena paused, gathering courage. She says she hasn't seen me this happy in years. The air between them shifted, heavy with unspoken feelings. Through the office window, James could see their reflection. The successful CEO and the former factory worker, standing close enough to share breath, but separated by invisible lines. Of propriety and circumstance, Elena, he started just as his phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Reminder, Emma's science presentation is at 2. The moment wavered, then settled into something warm but safe. Elena stepped back, professional, mask slipping partially back into place. You should go. Emma's been practicing that presentation for weeks. Will you come? The words left his mouth before he could second-guess them. She'd love to have you there. We all would. Elena's smile bloomed slow and beautiful. Try to stop me. I'll have Thomas bring the car around. As they walked to the elevator together, James thought about Marcus's card, about impromptu game nights and carnival plans, about the way happiness sneaked up on you in the quiet moments between grand gestures. Sometimes the biggest feelings, hid in the smallest details, in bright blue envelopes and shared smiles, in the gentle erosion of boundaries between two worlds becoming one. The emergency alert flashed across every screen in the Foundation's headquarters. Urgent! Flash floods threatening Riverside Medical Center project. All senior staff report immediately. James was already moving, jacket in hand, when Elena burst into his office. Her usual composed appearance showed signs of strain, hair slightly disheveled, tablet clutched too tightly. The clinic, she said, voice tight. The one we just finished in River Valley. The levee's failing. I saw the alert. How bad? Bad. She pulled up satellite imagery on his wall screen. 3 months of rain in 36 hours. The river's rising fast, and the clinic sits right in the flood path. We have 60 minutes, maybe less, before we lose everything we built, James finished. The clinic had been his first major project. Designing it, staffing it, watching it become a beacon of hope for a community that had gone too long without proper medical care. How many patients? 43, including 6 in the temporary post-op ward. Elena's fingers flew across her tablet. I've got helicopters on standby, but the nearest landing zone is compromised. The board's pushing to evacuate staff only. Cut our losses on the equipment. No! The word came out firm, decisive. Elena's head snapped up at his tone. We're not abandoning those patients. Pull up the topographical maps of the area and get me Mike from my old factory on the phone. Mike? But why would... Because before he supervised assembly lines, he drove heavy machinery in flood zones, and I'm betting he knows every back road in that valley. Understanding dawned in Elena's eyes. She handed him her phone, already dialing. The next 45 minutes were a blur of action. Mike's knowledge of old logging roads proved invaluable. James coordinated with local emergency services, directing resources with the same instinct that had sent him into a river to save Elena all those months ago. The excavators can shore up this section, he indicated on the map, surrounded now by Foundation staff and first responders, patched in via video. Create a temporary barrier while we evacuate, but we'll need... Already done, Elena interrupted, matching his pace. I've got 3 construction crews en route, but James, she hesitated. Someone needs to be on site to coordinate this. He was already reaching for his keys. I know. I'm coming with you. Elena, don't. Her voice held the steel that had built a tech empire. Those are our people down there, our project, our responsibility. The drive to River Valley was tense, both of them fielding calls as Thomas navigated the increasingly treacherous roads. Rain hammered the SUV's windows, and twice they had to detour around flooded intersections. 5 minutes out, Thomas reported. Elena ended her last call, then reached across the seat to grasp James's hand. Whatever happens, I want you to know. The SUV's headlights caught the clinic through the rain. The situation was even worse than the report suggested. Water pressed against hastily assembled barriers, and the nearby river roared with frightening power. But the scene wasn't one of panic. Under Mike's direction, the excavators were already in position. Local volunteers filled sandbags alongside foundation staff. Inside the clinic, visible through lit windows, medical teams calmly prepared patients for transport. Look at them, Elena breathed. They're not running, they're fighting for it. Because they know it's worth fighting for. James squeezed her hand once before letting go. Ready? The next 3 hours tested every skill James had learned, both in the factory and at the foundation. He coordinated crews, directed resources, and helped carry patients to waiting vehicles. Elena worked alongside him, her designer clothes soaked through, never hesitating to lift, carry, or hold someone's hand. When the last patient was safely evacuated, when the temporary barriers held just long enough, when the water finally began to recede, only then did they stop to breathe. They stood in the clinic's main hall, rain dripping from their clothes, surveying the damage. Water had breached the lower sections, but the building's core stood firm. Equipment had been saved, records secured, and most importantly, every single person was safe. The board's going to have opinions about this, Elena said finally, wringing water from her hair, about the cost of the operation versus the value of the equipment. And I'm going to tell them to shove their spreadsheets where the sun doesn't shine. She turned to face him fully. You did it, James, when everyone said cut our losses, when the smart business move was to walk away. You showed us what real leadership looks like. We did it, he corrected gently. All of us. Yes, but it was your heart that showed us how. Eleanor stepped closer, her hand coming up to rest against his chest. Your impossible, incredible heart that jumps into rivers and refuses to give up on people and makes me feel like anything is possible. The air between them crackled with more than storm electricity. Around them, their teams worked to secure the building. But in that moment, the world had narrowed to just them, standing in the aftermath of crisis, barriers finally washing away. Elena's private journal lay open on her desk, her normally precise handwriting scattered across the page in emotional loops. How do you write about the moment everything changes? When the man you've been falling for proves yet again that his heart is exactly as big as you thought. Standing in that clinic, watching James coordinate the rescue effort, I finally understood what I've been fighting these past months. It's not just attraction or admiration. It's not even about the rescue anymore. I'm in love with him. Completely, utterly, terrifyingly in love with him. A knock interrupted her writing. Shannon stood in the doorway of her home office, eyebrows raised at the sight of her usually composed sister sprawled over her desk. So, Shannon said, settling into a chair, Marcus says you held hands with James during the entire carnival, in public. And now I hear you two saved a clinic together. Eleanor closed the journal, but not before her sister caught its contents. You're journaling again? You haven't done that since Dad died, Eleanor finished. I know, but lately, everything feels too big to keep inside. The media's having a field day, Shannon noted, sliding her tablet across the desk. The headlines ranged from glowing, power couple saves local clinic, to sensational, tech queen and blue-collar hero, love conquers class divide. Let them talk. Elena touched her silver cross, a gesture that now reminded her of both her parents and a certain rain-soaked night. The board's more concerned about my emotional investment affecting business decisions. Because you chose to save people instead of profits, Shannon scoffed. Sounds like exactly the kind of emotional investment Dad always taught us to have. James didn't even hesitate, Elena said softly. He just knew what was right. Like with the river that night. He makes me remember who I wanted to be before quarterly reports and shareholder meetings took over my life. And the girls. Marcus can't stop talking about them. A smile tugged at Elena's lips. Sarah's so much like her mother, James showed me pictures. She has this quiet strength, this way of seeing right through you. And Emma, she laughed, Emma's already planning to intern at Horizon's tech division. She says she's going to design better emergency alert systems. You're glowing, Shannon observed. I haven't seen you like this since, well, ever. I'm terrified, Elena admitted. What if I'm rushing in? What if the media pressure becomes, oh, too much for them? What if you're letting fear stop you from being happy? Shannon reached across the desk, squeezing her sister's hand. Elena, that man dove into a river to save a stranger. He helped build a foundation project that's changing lives. He makes you laugh, his girls adore you, and from what Marcus tells me, he even handles your competitive Scrabble tantrums with grace. I do not have Scrabble tantrums. The point is, Shannon continued, ignoring the protest, maybe it's time to stop analyzing and start living. Dad always said the best investments are the ones that scare you a little. Elena's phone buzzed, a text from James. Girls want to know if you're free for dinner. Emma's attempting souffle. No pressure, but we may need rescue services. Shannon caught her sister's expression. Go, she said simply. And Eleanor, that journal entry I glimpsed, tell him what you wrote. Some things shouldn't stay on paper. Later that evening, as Elena drove to the Mitchell home, she passed Pleasant Valley Bridge. The repaired guardrail gleamed in her headlights. No sign remaining of the accident that had changed everything. But changes, she was learning, didn't stop with single moments. They continued in quiet dinners and carnival games, in crisis management and simple touches, in the way her heart jumped at the sight of James's house lights glowing, welcome through the dusk. She parked beside his modest SUV. He'd refused anything flashier despite his new position, and caught her reflection in the window. The polished CEO was still there, but softer now, more real. In her hand, she clutched a folder of clinic reconstruction plans, the perfect excuse for an impromptu visit. But maybe Shannon was right. Maybe it was time to stop needing excuses. The door opened before she reached it, warm light spilling out, along with the smell of something definitely not souffle-like burning. James stood there, flour on his shirt and laughter in his eyes. So, he said, grinning, about that rescue. Eleanor felt the last of her carefully constructed walls crumble. Sometimes the biggest truth was the simplest one. She was exactly where she wanted to be. The concert tickets sat on James's kitchen counter, their gold embossing catching the morning light. Evening with the symphony, private box seating. Eleanor had left them there the night before, after what they'd both carefully called just dinner, but had felt like so much more. Dad, stop staring at them like they're going to bite you, Sarah said, sliding onto a bar stool. It's just a concert. It's not just a concert. James touched the tickets, remembering Eleanor's nervous smile as she'd presented them. This would be official, public. More public than saving her from a sinking car, more public than running a foundation together, more public than her practically living here every Thursday. Sarah's eyebrows rose in a perfect teenage challenge. She's got you there, Dad, Emma chimed in, appearing with her tablet. Besides, Elena already told Marcus, who told his friends, who told their parents. Half the private school circuit knows. You're going together. James ran a hand through his hair. And that doesn't bother you too. The attention, the changes, the way people might talk. His daughters exchanged a look he couldn't quite interpret. Then Sarah pulled out her phone, pulling up a photo from last week's game night. In it, Eleanor was teaching Emma some complex card trick, both of them laughing, while Marcus watched in amazement. The joy in the image was palpable, unscripted. "Real, Dad," Sarah said softly. "Nothing needs to change. It already has, in all the best ways." The doorbell rang before he could respond. Emma rushed to answer it, calling back, "It's Elena, and she's wearing her nervous-about-something outfit." James recognized the simple blue dress the moment Elena stepped into the kitchen, the same one she'd worn to their first dinner together. She wore it when she wanted to be Elena, not CEO Chen. Today, she'd paired it with the silver cross and a slightly terrified expression. "I know the tickets might be too much," she started before anyone could speak. "The symphony's doing this special performance, and I thought... But if you're not comfortable with such a public venue, we could—" "Elena," James interrupted gently. "Breathe." She inhaled shakily, then seemed to register the girls' presence and their matching grins. "Oh, good morning. I didn't mean to interrupt breakfast." "You're not interrupting," Emma said cheerfully. "Dad was just having a minor panic about the tickets, too. You're both ridiculous, by the way." "Emma!" James protested, but Elena's laugh broke the tension. "She's not wrong," Elena admitted, moving further into the kitchen, into their space, where she fit so naturally now. "I had Shannon talk me out of 3 different crisis scenarios this morning." "Only 3? Sarah teased. "You're slipping." The easy banter, the way his daughters included Eleanor in their gentle mockery, settled something in James's chest. This wasn't about a fancy concert or public statements. This was about acknowledging what had already grown between them, as natural as breathing. "I'd love to go to the symphony with you," he said simply. Elena's smile bloomed slow and beautiful. "Yeah? Yeah." He stepped closer, aware of his daughters trying and failing to hide their delight. "Though I should warn you, my music knowledge stops at what plays on the factory floor. Good thing you'll have an expert guide." Her eyes sparkled with relief and something warmer. "I promise to explain all the fancy terms." "Like you did with the corporate jargon?" "Exactly. Though this time—" She glanced at the girls, then back to him. "This time I was hoping we could call it what it is." "And what's that?" James asked softly. "A date." Elena's voice was quiet but certain. "A real one. In public. With someone I'm falling in love with." The kitchen went silent. Even Emma stopped bouncing. James felt the weight of the moment, not heavy, but profound, like standing on the bridge that night, knowing everything would change with the next step. "Well," he said finally, his voice rough with emotion, "that works out pretty well, because I'm falling in love with you too." Emma's squeal broke the spell. "Finally! Sarah, you owe me $5. I said they'd admit it before the concert." "You bet on us?" Elena asked, laughing even as she wiped at suspiciously damp eyes. "The whole foundation probably has a pool going," Sarah admitted, "though I think Mrs. Rodriguez in accounting had her. Money on the Christmas party." James pulled Elena close, marveling at how natural it felt to hold her, to be held by her. "So much for keeping it subtle. I think that ship sailed somewhere between the river rescue and the flood crisis," Elena murmured against his shoulder. Then louder, "Girls, how do you feel about helping me pick out a dress for Saturday? I hear I have a rather important date." Their enthusiastic responses filled the kitchen with plans and possibilities. The concert tickets still sat on the counter, but they no longer looked intimidating. Instead, they seemed like what they were, just one more step on a path they'd been walking together all along. The old recipe book lay open on the kitchen counter, its pages spotted with generations of loving use. Catherine's handwriting filled the margins with notes. "Add more vanilla. Girls love this with ice cream. James's favorite." Beside it sat Elena's mother's cookbook, its Mandarin characters carefully translated in Shannon's neat script. "So the secret is potato starch, not corn starch?" James asked, peering at the dumpling recipe Elena was attempting to teach him. "Exactly." Mum always said cornstarch makes them too heavy. Elena demonstrated the pleating technique again, her fingers moving with practiced grace. She taught me and Shannon in this tiny kitchen in our first apartment. Dad would come home from his second job and pretend to judge them like a cooking show host. In the living room, Shannon and Sarah were teaching Marcus and Emma the proper way to play mahjong, their laughter mixing with the click of tiles. The scene was so perfectly domestic that it made James's heart ache in the best way. "Your dumpling's falling apart," Elena noted, trying to hide her smile. "That's because someone's distracting me." He bumped her hip gently with his. "Besides, I seem to remember a certain CEO burning her first attempt at Mitchell family mac and cheese. That recipe was unnecessarily vague. Add cheese until it looks right is not proper documentation," says the woman whose mother's recipe includes a breath of ginger. Their playful bickering was interrupted by Emma's triumphant shout from the other room. "I won! Aunt Shannon, I won!" The casual use of aunt made Elena's hands still on the dumpling she was folding. James watched emotions play across her face, joy, wonder, maybe a touch of fear. "Hey," he said softly, dusting flour from his hands to touch her cheek. "You okay?" "More than okay." She leaned into his touch. "It's just, I haven't heard that word since my parents passed. Shannon and I never had other family, and now suddenly you have two teenage girls calling you aunt, a nephew who thinks you hang the moon, and a boyfriend who can't fold dumplings to save his life? Poor technique aside," she smiled up at him, "it's pretty perfect." Sarah appeared in the kitchen doorway, Marcus trailing behind her. "Something smells amazing. Also, Emma's getting suspiciously good at mahjong. I think she's counting tiles." "Like you didn't count cards that time at family game night," Marcus shot back, but his grin took any sting from the words. "Speaking of counting," Shannon called from the living room, "these dumplings are taking forever, and some of us are starving." "Critics," Elena muttered, but her eyes danced. "Come on, everyone wash up and help. Family cooking lesson time." Soon the kitchen was organized chaos. Emma and Marcus competing to fold the prettiest dumplings, Sarah expertly manning the stove, Shannon and Eleanor arguing good-naturedly about proper vinegar ratios for the dipping sauce. James stood back for a moment, taking in the scene. The two recipe books sat side by side, their pages mingling like the families themselves. He thought about Catherine, about how she would have loved this moment, these people. The ache was still there, but different now, more grateful memory than raw loss. "Earth to Dad?" Emma waved a flour-covered hand in front of his face. "Eleanor says you're supposed to show us the secret to your pizza dough next. For the fusion. Dinner party?" "Right. The dinner party they'd somehow agreed to host for both foundation staff and factory friends next week. A blend of worlds, just like everything else in their lives now. The secret," he said solemnly, "is in the kneading technique, which I learned from your mother, who learned it from her grandmother, who apparently got it from an Italian neighbor. During the Depression. See?" Eleanor smiled, adding the story to the margin of Catherine's recipe book, their family's histories literally merging on the page. "Every recipe tells a story, every tradition builds a bridge. Deep thoughts for dumpling day," Shannon teased. But her eyes were soft as she watched her sister's careful notation. "Fortune cookie wisdom," Elena agreed. "Speaking of which, wait until you try James's attempt at those next week. They're structurally unique. Hey, they taste fine. They're square, honey. Fortune cookies aren't supposed to be square." The casual endearment slipped out naturally, making them both pause. Around them, their family continued their happy chaos, but for a moment they simply looked at each other, flour-dusted, happy, and utterly content. "Square fortune cookies," James said finally, pulling her close despite her mock protests about getting flour on her dress. Another Mitchell Chen family tradition in the making. The recipe book stayed open, ready to collect new stories, new margins filled with love notes from their expanding family. The corporate threat letter landed on Elena's desk like a bomb in elegant packaging. Heavy, cream-colored paper, professional letterhead, careful language that couldn't quite hide its venom. The board has concerns about the increasing personal entanglement between Horizon's CEO and a foundation employee. Questions have been raised about Mr. Mitchell's rapid promotion, the allocation of resources during the River Valley crisis, and the impact of this relationship on shareholder value. Eleanor's hands shook as she reached the final paragraph. In light of these concerns, the board suggests a review of Mr. Mitchell's position and a careful reconsideration of this public relationship before the upcoming shareholder meeting. Her office door opened without a knock, James carrying 2 coffee cups and wearing the warm smile that usually made her heart flip. Today, it made her chest ache. "I come bearing caffeine and good news," he announced. "The River Valley clinics numbers just came in. Patient attendance is up 40% from projections," and he stopped, noting her expression. "Elena, what's wrong?" She tried to slide the letter into her drawer, but he caught the movement. Years of reading her tells had made him frustratingly perceptive. "Show me," he said quietly. "It's nothing, just standard corporate—" "Elena!" She handed him the letter, watching as he read, seeing the moment understanding darkened his eyes. When he finished, he set it down with careful control. "They're threatening my job unless you end our relationship. They're trying to—" She corrected. CEO Steele entering her voice. "But they've forgotten who built this company, who holds controlling interest. Who's facing a crucial merger next month?" James's voice was gentle. "The one you've been working toward for years. The one that could expand Horizon's medical technology division globally." Elena stood abruptly, pacing to the window. The city sprawled below, including the hospital where their technology was already saving lives. "You've been reading the business briefs. I like to know what matters to you." He moved behind her, close but not touching. "The letter's right. About one thing, the River Valley crisis. I made that call emotionally. Put foundation resources at risk. You made the right call." She spun to face him. "You saved lives, equipment, community trust. The board's just looking for excuses because they can't stand that I'm happy with someone who didn't come from their world. Or maybe they're worried because they've seen how I look at you, how I drop everything, risk anything to keep you safe, just like that night at the river. James, I won't be the reason you lose everything you've built." His voice was firm but threaded with pain. "Your company helps millions. The merger would double that reach. I can step back, take a lower position, keep things professional." Until the sound of her hand hitting her desk made them both jump. "No, I won't let them do this, not to us, not to our family." "Our family," he repeated softly. "Emma called Shannon yesterday to help with her science project. Sarah's teaching Marcus photography. Your sister hosted us for Sunday dinner like it was the most natural thing in the world. And now they want us to pretend none of that matters. It matters more than any merger." Elena reached for her silver cross, then deliberately let it go. "My parents built something from nothing in this country, taught me and Shannon that success means nothing without family, without love. I won't dishonor their memory by choosing shareholders over happiness." "Elena, think about—" "I have thought about it, every angle, every consequence." She stepped closer, taking his face in her hands. "You want to know what I realized? The night you saved me, you didn't check my net worth first. Didn't calculate risk versus reward. You saw someone in need and acted from pure heart. Maybe it's time I did the same." The board can either accept that their CEO has found something more valuable than profit margins, or they can find themselves a new CEO. Her voice softened. "I jumped into deep water with you once. I'm not afraid to do it again." James studied her face, seeing the determination there, the strength that had built an empire, and the love that made her willing to risk it. Slowly, he pulled her into his arms. "You know," he murmured against her hair, "this is usually the part where I'm supposed to be noble and walk away. Sacrifice everything to protect your dreams." She laughed shakily against his chest. "Try it." And I'll have Emma unleash her puppy dog eyes on you. Nobody's immune to those. Fighting dirty Ms. Chen. Learning from the best, Mr. Mitchell, she pulled back to meet his eyes. So, are we doing this? Taking on the board, the shareholders, anyone else who thinks they get a vote in our happiness? James thought of their blended family dinners, of Sarah's college plans now including business courses, of Emma's determination to revolutionize medical technology just like Elena. He thought of Shannon's welcome, of Marcus's easy acceptance, of all the bridges they'd built between their worlds. Together, he said firmly. We're doing this together. The threat letter sat forgotten on the desk, its power diminishing with every heartbeat they shared. Some storms, they were learning, only made you hold on tighter. Elena's press conference notes were brief but powerful, written in her decisive hand. Not here to defend love, here to celebrate it. Horizon's success built on human connections, not just profit margins. River Valley Clinic. Perfect example. James's leadership saved lives and resources. Numbers prove it. Board needs to decide, do we want to be known for our humanity or our fear of it? The Foundation's largest conference room was packed with reporters, board members and staff. James stood at the back, Sarah and Emma beside him, Shannon and Marcus nearby. Elena had insisted they all be present. This isn't just about business. This is about family. Ready? Thomas asked quietly, holding the door to the antechamber, where Eleanor waited. James squeezed his daughter's hands, then slipped inside. Eleanor stood at the window, wearing the same blue dress from their first dinner, her silver cross catching the light. She turned at his entrance, and her professional mask softened. The board's trying to convince me to reconsider, she said. Offered to keep you in position if we maintain appropriate professional distance. And I told them that appropriate distance went out the window the night you jumped into a river for a stranger. She smiled, touching his chest where his heart beat steady and strong, though I didn't mention that I've been falling ever since. A knock signaled it was time. Elena straightened, CEO persona sliding back into place, but her eyes stayed warm as she looked at him. Sure you want to do this? He asked softly. There's still time to... James Mitchell, if you suggest stepping back for my own good one. More time, I'm having Emma teach you mahjong again. He laughed, the tension breaking. That's just cruel. Then they were walking out together, flashbulbs popping, whispers rippling through the crowd. The board members sat in the front row, their expressions ranging from concerned to openly hostile. But Elena's stride never faltered as she approached the podium, James a steady presence beside her. Thank you all for coming, she began, her voice clear and confident. I've called this press conference to address recent speculation about my personal relationship with James Mitchell and about the future of Horizon Technologies. She paused, looking not at her notes, but at James, drawing strength from his presence. 6 months ago, a car accident changed my life, not because I nearly died, but because I met someone who showed me what real value looks like. Someone who jumps into rivers for strangers, who sees problems and solves them with pure heart, who reminds me daily why I built this company in the first place. Cameras clicked rapidly as she continued, her voice carrying deeper emotion now. My parents came to this country with nothing but hope and determination. They built a life from scratch, taught their daughters that success means nothing without compassion. When I founded Horizon, it wasn't just to make profit, it was to make difference. She turned to face the board directly. The River Valley Clinic crisis proved what kind of leader James Mitchell is. When others saw liability, he saw lives worth saving. When spreadsheets said cut our losses, he found a way to save everything. Lives, equipment, community trust. Those aren't just feel-good stories. They're solid business decisions that improved our standings in every metric. Elena's hand found James's, holding tight. But more importantly, James reminded me what my parents always knew, that the biggest risks bring the greatest rewards, that love isn't a liability, It's the strongest foundation you can build on. She squared her shoulders, her voice taking on an edge of steel. So yes, James Mitchell and I are together. Yes, we're building a life and blending our families. And no, we won't apologize for it or hide it. The board has a choice to make. Stand with us as we continue to grow this company with both heart and wisdom, or find themselves a new CEO who's willing to pretend that profit margins matter more than people. The room erupted in questions, but Elena wasn't finished. She turned to James, her public persona falling away as she smiled up at him. "Your turn," she whispered. James stepped forward, not quite comfortable with the spotlight, but steady in his conviction. "I'm not going to pretend I understand all the corporate politics at play here, but I do understand this. Sometimes the biggest act of courage isn't jumping into dangerous waters, it's standing your ground when others want you to back down." From the back of the room came a sudden whoop. Emma, unable to contain herself. Sarah tried to shush her, but the moment had broken. The tension. Laughter rippled through the crowd, and even some board members smiled. Elena's notes lay forgotten on the podium as she and James faced the cameras together, their joined hands saying more than any prepared statement could. Some battles they knew. You won simply by refusing to fight on your opponent's terms. The memorial plaque gleamed in the late afternoon sun, its bronze surface catching the light just as the river flowed beneath it. Pleasant Valley Bridge, where courage met destiny. On this spot, one act of selfless bravery changed not just 2 lives, but an entire community, dedicated to James Mitchell and Elena Chen, whose story reminds us that the greatest bridges are built between hearts. "They made it too dramatic," James muttered, adjusting his tie. The small crowd gathering for the dedication ceremony included familiar faces. Factory workers, foundation staff, board members who'd finally come around after the clinic's success had made international news. "I think it's perfect," Emma declared, snapping photos with her new camera, though they could have mentioned how you ruined your favorite jacket, or how Elena's designer shoes were never the same. Sarah added, grinning. Elena, stunning in another, blue dress. They'd learned it was James's favorite color on her, squeezed his hand. "I liked those shoes, but I'd say the trade was worth it." Shannon approached with Marcus, both carrying flowers for the ceremony. "The mayor's ready when you are. Though I still think you should have let them use the other quote. We are not memorializing Marcus's 'love is like a cannonball' dive speech from game night," Elena said firmly, but her eyes danced with laughter. "It was poetic," Marcus protested, "and technically accurate. You both kind of splashed into each other's lives." James looked out over the river, remembering that night. The water was calm now, summer lazy and peaceful. Hard to imagine it had ever been the raging force that had nearly taken Elena from him before he'd even known her. Having second thoughts. "About the ceremony?" Elena asked softly, reading his expression. "Just remembering. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd been 5 minutes later, or taken a different route home. Then I'd have had to save myself," she said practically, "and probably ruin a much more expensive pair of shoes." He laughed, pulling her close. "You know what I mean." "I do." She touched her silver cross, then reached up to straighten his tie. "But I prefer to think it happened exactly as it was supposed to. Right time, right place, right heart." The mayor approached, signaling it was time to begin. The small crowd gathered around the plaque, which had been mounted on a stone pedestal near the bridge's entrance. James noticed Mike from the factory, standing with Elena's board members, all of them looking surprisingly comfortable together. "Friends, family, honored guests," the mayor began, "we're here today to commemorate not just an act of heroism, but the ripple effects of courage." As the speech continued, James felt Sarah slip her hand into his free one. On Elena's other side, Shannon held Marcus close. They weren't just 2 separate families anymore. They were something new, something stronger for having been forged in crisis and tested by challenge. The mayor unveiled the plaque officially. Cameras flashed, and polite applause rippled through the crowd. But the real ceremony came after, when the officials had left and only family remained. Emma went first, tossing a flower into the river. For Dad's ruined jacket, which nobly sacrificed itself for true love. Sarah followed. For Mom, who definitely had a hand in making sure Dad drove this way that night. Marcus, for game nights and dumpling disasters and learning that family can grow in the best ways. Shannon, for little sisters who finally learned that some risks are worth taking. They each added their own memories, their own markers of a journey. Finally, only James and Elena remained at the railing. Together, she asked, holding out a single rose. They tossed it into the current, watching it float beneath the bridge where everything had started. Elena leaned back against James's chest, his arms wrapping around her naturally. You know, she said thoughtfully, the Foundation's expanding its water safety program, teaching rescue techniques, installing emergency equipment along rivers like this one. Hoping to inspire more dramatic love stories? Hoping to remind people that sometimes the scariest moments can lead to the most beautiful changes. She turned in his arms to face him. The board approved it unanimously, by the way, along with your promotion to full partnership in the Foundation. James blinked. When did... This morning. Turns out saving lives, building clinics, and loving someone enough to face down corporate politics makes a pretty compelling case for leadership. Their family had moved a respectful distance away, pretending not to watch while obviously watching. The late sun painted the river gold, catching Elena's silver cross and the simple band James had started carrying in his pocket, waiting for the right moment. Speaking of leadership positions, he said carefully, I've been thinking about another. A partnership opportunity. Elena's eyes widened as he reached into his pocket. Behind them, Emma's squeal of delight broke any pretense of privacy, but neither of them minded. Some moments deserved witnesses, especially when those witnesses were family. The wedding invitation sat framed in the heart room, its elegant simplicity capturing everything about their journey. Two worlds, two hearts, one bridge between them. Elena Chen and James Mitchell invite you to celebrate love's courage as they join their lives and families together. 1 year after the bridge dedication, their home buzzed with familiar chaos. Emma and Marcus hunched over circuit boards in the kitchen, working on their science fair project, a new emergency alert system for flood zones. Sarah sat at her art desk by the window, adding final touches to her wedding gift, a series of hand-drawn moments from their story, from the river rescue to family game nights. "Dad!" Emma called out. "Elena's breaking the no work on wedding week rule again." James found his fiancée in their shared home office, surrounded by Foundation papers. She had the grace to look slightly guilty when he appeared in the doorway. "In my defense," she said, "this is the River Valley Clinic's 1-year report. I thought you'd want to see the numbers." "The numbers can wait." He plucked the papers from her hands, but not before catching glimpses of impressive statistics. "Though I saw enough to know we did good work there. We did amazing work everywhere this year." Elena stood, wrapping her arms around his waist. "The Foundation's education initiative is already helping 50 single-parent families with college funds. The emergency response protocols we developed after the flood have been adopted by 3 other states. And the board actually sent us a wedding gift. Let me guess, a spreadsheet showing improved quarterly earnings? No, smartness. They named the new medical technology division after my parents." Her voice softened. Dad would have loved knowing. His name was helping people heal. A crash from the kitchen, followed by teenage laughter, interrupted the moment. "Should we be worried?" James asked. "With those two?" "Always." But Elena's smile was fond. "Though I have to admit, their prototype is impressive. Shannon's already talking about patents." They wandered to the kitchen, where the crash proved to be nothing more serious than dropped circuit boards. Marcus was explaining something about voltage to Emma, using terms James barely understood, but that made Elena beam with aunt's pride. "Sarah," she called out, "are you joining us for lunch? Shannon and Thomas will be here soon, with the final dress alterations." Coming. Sarah appeared, charcoal smudged on her cheek. Just finished the last drawing, though I left space to add, tomorrow's ceremony. The doorbell rang, Shannon's distinctive 3-beat knock followed by Thomas's more formal 2 taps. Their arrival sparked controlled chaos. Dress bags rustling, Marcus and Emma scrambling to clear their project, Sarah hastily washing charcoal from her hands. I brought the final seating arrangements, Shannon announced, ever the organized matron, of honor. Though I still think putting Mike from the factory next to that stuffy board member is asking for trouble. Mike's storytelling will do them good, James said, helping Thomas with the garment bags. Besides, Elena's convinced half the board to start volunteering at the clinic. They're developing actual human emotions. Miracles never cease. Thomas deadpanned, having long since become part of their extended family. Though I did catch Mr. Peterson asking about factory bowling league tryouts. Lunch became an impromptu family meeting, with everyone talking over each other about last-minute wedding details. Eleanor sat back, watching it all with bright eyes. Overwhelmed? James asked. Softly, the opposite. She touched her silver cross, then his hand. A year ago, I was worried about keeping 2 worlds separate. Now look at us, all these bridges we've built. As if to prove her point, Marcus launched into a detailed explanation of their project's fail-safe systems, while Sarah showed Shannon her artwork, and Emma debated reception music with Thomas. Their family had grown in ways none of them could have imagined that night at the river. Oh, Shannon suddenly remembered something, pulling out an envelope. The final surprise came through. Elena, remember that emergency response technology you and James developed after River Valley? Elena nodded. They'd created new protocols for flood zones, combining James's practical experience with her technical knowledge. The patent office approved it this morning. The Mitchell-Chen Emergency Response System is officially ready for national implementation. James stared at the patent document, their names side by side. Mitchell-Chen? Well, Eleanor smiled, we are joining forces in every way tomorrow, though technically it'll be Chen Mitchell on the wedding certificate, alphabetical order. Actually, Sarah spoke up, we've been thinking about that. She glanced at Emma, who nodded encouragement. What if we all took both names? Being Mitchell-Chens together? The room went quiet. Elena's hand found James's, squeezing tight. You girls don't have to, she began. We want to, Emma said firmly. We're not losing who we were. We're just becoming more. James looked around, at their beautiful blended family, at the love that had grown from one desperate moment into something stronger than any current. Tomorrow they would make it official, but the truth was, they'd been building this bridge between hearts all along. Mitchell-Chen, he tested the sound, has a nice ring to it. Elena's answer was a kiss that made the teenagers groan, and Shannon applaud. Outside, Pleasant Valley Bridge stood strong and sure, its memorial plaque catching the sun like a promise kept. Some rivers you crossed changed your life forever. Some bridges, once built, became the foundation for everything that mattered.